Hello and welcome to another Liverpool.com podcast. I am Dan Morgan. I'm going to be hosting this week. I'm joined by Liverpool.com staff writers Mark Wakefield and Joel Rabinowitz, and also Blood Red's Matt Addison. Gentlemen, hope we're all okay today. For you, the listener, for you who are just tuning into this at whatever time or place, fear not, we're not going to spare you Aston Villa all over again. We will take some sound bites and some talking points from Villa to look at, because obviously it is a massive sort of shock and reverberation around the Liverpool supporter contingent, and rightly so. But we're not going to spare you the gory details. Believe me, we've done it to death and we are sick of it. So that being said, Mark, I'll come to you first because I want to talk about Sadio Mane. And you wrote a piece for our site this week. And I think I'm fair in assessing that the tone of the piece was how in many ways Mane, by virtue of becoming one of Liverpool's most important players, if not the most important, has also become a bit of a problem in that sense too. Because he has gone to levels which make him so unique that I think it's unfair for supporters and anyone who expecting Diogo Jota to sort of replicate what Sadio Mane can do in this team. But I think it is fair, isn't it, to suggest that he is now, in a lot of senses, defensively, attacking, game intelligence, one of, if not Liverpool's most important footballers.
Definitely. I mean, when you talk about the topic of Liverpool's most important players, often people will say either Alisson, Van Dijk, Salah, even at times Jordan Henderson in midfield. But I just think with Mane, you just see he just sets the tone for the whole game, whatever game he's in. And you saw it against Arsenal. He led the press from the front. He dominated pretty much every aspect of the game. And I just think he has just that aura about him that I think just reverberates around the whole team, like all the way from the goalkeeper all the way through to the rest of the team. And obviously, if fans were present, obviously it feels around the stands as well. I just think when he's not there, I just think the players just feel a bit of a loss. I think it's a bit similar to when Barcelona without Messi, Juventus without Ronaldo. You could probably go as far as when Man City without De Bruyne. I just think he is so important, not just for what he does in an attacking sense, but just the confidence around the whole squad. And people will just think, the players will think, we've got Mane, we'll be fine. If it's not him plucking something out of magic, he'll just help spur the team on to get the goal or keep a clean sheet if needed, because he does a lot of defensive work that often doesn't get seen, noticed very much. And I think that he pretty much just sets the tone of what everything Jurgen Klopp's about: high pressing, full energy, and also just basically not giving in until the final whistle is blown.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's almost cruel, Matt, that is the last game before he gets ruled out with COVID is that Arsenal game, because I think it's a prime example of sort of the defensive intensity in his game now, and he was almost going across the line to set that press at times. He's really sort of feels like it's sort of a personal thing with him now. He really feels, I think he sees a sense of responsibility within this Liverpool attack to sort of start that defender from the front, and this is a team with Roberto Firmino in it. It's some testament, but I think there's a couple of things that you do see at Villa. There's obviously flaws all over the place, but from an attacking and defending sense, the manner in which Mane's missing it was standout, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to know where to start, isn't it, with Aston Villa? Yeah. I think, specifically in terms of Mane, you do lose obviously a lot going forward. That sort of goes without saying at this point. I think he has become one of Liverpool's most important, definitely, and probably arguably their best player over the last couple of seasons. And I think obviously we're going to touch on Roberto Firmino later. I think you sort of feel the loss of Sadio Mane when he's not there even more at this moment in time, because it's not quite working for Firmino in terms of the pressing and the off-the-ball thing that he does as well. I think if Roberto Firmino is absolutely at his peak and he's doing that pressing, you possibly don't notice the loss of Sadio Mane quite in the same way that you do it at this moment in time. But just listening to what Mark was saying before there, it kind of almost reminded me of when Felipe Coutinho was at Liverpool. And obviously not in a defensive sense, but certainly going forward, it's a case of Liverpool's players almost looking for him at every opportunity. Obviously, there's other top players there as well. You've got Mohamed Salah, who actually I thought had a pretty decent game against Aston Villa, took his goals quite well. But it did remind me of sort of Coutinho in the sense that when you take him out of the team, there's almost a gap that needs filling. There's a hole there. It's not quite as complete as what it normally is. And I think it's absolutely fair to say at the start of this season and probably in sort of lockdown at times as well, that Liverpool very much did look to Sadio Mane to almost drag them forward at times. I think certainly you wouldn't want to take Aston Villa as being the marker of that, and the fact that he was missing wasn't the complete reason for the performance going the way that it did. But certainly it didn't help, and I think Sadio Mane has kind of elevated himself to such a level now at Liverpool where when you do miss him, you really do miss him. And I'm not saying that Aston Villa is going to happen week in, week out. I think there will be a couple more of those sort of freak results, if you like, not just for Liverpool, but for other teams going forward. But certainly you take somebody as important as him out of the system as much as the attacking sense, and you are obviously going to feel a huge loss.
There's something Villa and Dean Smith do, Joel, I think, which is they turn the game into a bit of a coin toss. And I think he decides on this before the game's kicked off, Smith. I think he thinks there's only one way in which we're getting something from this, and we have a go at them. And if it becomes a mad game, then so be it. But he puts his chips into sort of having a go at having a bit of a boxing match, a tennis match, whatever analogy you want to make with Liverpool, a bit of a back and forth. Now, where I think you miss Mane most is a lot of people have said in that scenario, so Liverpool at the worst, I'd say, are probably in the game when they go 2-1 down. I don't think they do anything to sort of stem the flow of Villa. Villa just go up the other end and score again. People say you miss Jordan Henderson and Thiago getting the foot on the ball for 10 minutes in a game at the times when Liverpool needs it. I actually think you miss Mane in those attacking third situations where he's very good at slowing the game down to a pace that he wants and keeping Liverpool within final third areas. Whereas I think Salah relies on the chaos a little bit. He relies on sort of things breaking a lot of the time and having space in front of him. Firmino's often doing work going backwards. I think Mane's the one who can sort of dictate tempo in the attacking third areas. And I think that was, again, I think it was something that was missing when Liverpool needed just to pen Villa in for 5-10 minutes. He wasn't there and it wasn't sticking.
Yeah, the thing with Mane that I think sets him apart from quite a lot of kind of attackers of his ilk is that he's so actively involved in all aspects of the game, like you say, in terms of build-up play, in terms of defensively, in terms of just keeping the ball and having the ball. He's such a useful outlet. I thought you're right to mention the Arsenal game beforehand. I know he only gets the one goal in that one, but I think that's one of the best Mane performances we've seen in a long, long time in terms of his all-round contribution. There were points there where it just felt the ball was just attached to his boot. Really, Arsenal couldn't get near him. He's like a one-man wrecking ball, really, at times. And Liverpool did miss that massively. I think Salah, like Matt said, he takes the finishes really well, but he's not exactly in the game as much as you would like him to be. Weirdly enough, as much as we say we missed Mane, and I completely agree that we do, I thought the left-hand side was actually one of the few parts of Liverpool's game that was kind of working relatively well compared to the rest. I thought Robertson was probably Liverpool's best player on the day. And I thought Jota, as much as he didn't replicate what Mane would give you, was at least more effective than most. He tried. He had the role in the goal that gets it back to 2-1. So yeah, hopefully it's just a one-off and he's back in time to play against Everton. But I completely agree in terms of his stature, and I think as well psychologically for opposition teams, just knowing that he's not on the pitch, it must give them a massive lift.
Yeah, absolutely. And then knowing Adrian is on the pitch as well. Sorry, that was a low blow. I'll refrain from that. One striker to the other, or one attacker to the other in Liverpool's team. Roberto Firmino, Mark. What do we do with him? Is the question that I want to know. It's fine to have an opinion. Is what I'd say is that we do nothing, and that he's doing perfectly fine. And I'm sort of this opinion. I think it gets highlighted when Liverpool don't win games of football, obviously. But Liverpool scored 75 Premier League goals last season, and finished the league on 99 points. Okay, there was issues made out of Firmino not scoring at home, but people weren't banging doors down for him to be taken out this side. Do we? I guess what I'm asking is, do we sort of countenance all the work that he does that isn't scoring goals for Liverpool and say that that's enough to keep him in this team, or are we now at the point where saying he needs a better output in front of goal?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you that I'm not of the opinion that. I personally think that the criticism of him is a bit unfair or very unfair, because I think it's been echoed a lot of the times how much his work goes unnoticed. Like, he does the hard yards, like he presses the ball. He's not selfish in the striker sense like many of the top strikers in the league are. But to the point of what you do with him, I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, personally, I'd like to see him maybe play, if they do a different formation, like try a 4-2-3-1, maybe have him behind the striker and maybe have someone like maybe Minamino, and then the interchange, do something a bit differently with that. Jota can also do that role as well. But I just think, a lot of it is a bit over the top, given the fact that Liverpool have lost their game of football quite badly, and I think people are looking for reasons as to what to change. Like, you lose a game badly, you've got to change something. Like, let's not forget, he is one of, if not their best attacking player. We've just talked to you guys about Mane, but he's better in a different sense. He leads the front, but I just think he needs to be a bit more selfish in his game at times. Like, we see a lot of occasions where, I think we're going to get onto it as well, where Liverpool are trying to score the perfect goal all the time, or it comes across as that. They're trying to basically get within 5 yards and then tap it in, which is something I think Man City have done or do very, really well since Pep Guardiola was gone in there. I think he has to have a bit more selfish streak about him, which top strikers do. But he, as we've said, he's a top striker in a different sense. But to your point of what we're doing, I was just trying to say to him, just try and be more aggressive in front of goal, just try and score more. If obviously it's easier said than done, but I think it's more of a tactical side of him rather than just hook him out of the team, hope for the best. I don't think that's the right way to do it at all.
If I have got one criticism, Matt, it is that he sort of, for me, needs to be more ruthless, but ruthless in the sense of just making sure that it gets put away. Because there's a few that stick out to me, and it's almost like he's in training. It's almost like the next one will come along in a minute, and it's, we're guaranteed to get goals from other places on the pitch. Is almost the subliminal manner in which he sort of is now in front of goal. There's one against Leeds where he just has to roll it into the near post and he tries to flick it with his outside of the boot to go across the keeper and the defender. And yeah, for me, if there is one criticism I've got, it's sort of make sure the chance goes when you need it to go. And I think, again, to reference Villa the other night, there's one where it's down the throat of the goalie. Can he do much more with that? I'm not sure, but that sort of thing for me is where, if I have got a slight criticism, that's where it'd lie.
I think so, but it's difficult, isn't it? At the same time, you think of Roberto Firmino at his best. It is that sort of elegant, effortless, doing things, the no-look finishes. That's kind of a sign almost that he's obviously still got some confidence in his own ability, because otherwise you would have thought he probably wouldn't have been sort of trying those sort of things. I think for me, the big issue with Firmino is that you accept that he doesn't always score goals. I think there's a bit of a misconception, if you like, that he was below par for the entirety of last season, which is absolutely not true. I think certainly, post-lockdown, he sort of had a bit of a lull. He's not properly started the season in the way that we would all like to see him play. But you accept that he doesn't score goals as long as the rest of his game is up there, as long as the pressing is perfect, the sort of link-up play, the sort of play that interchanging with, the midfielders, the wide players. But at the moment, for me, it's just not quite up there with the rest of his game. So suddenly now, because the rest of his game isn't quite perfect, you're suddenly looking at him and going, well, if he's not doing that, he's not scoring goals, what is he doing? And I think it is only fair that we have a conversation at this stage about that, because it's not a short-term thing. It's not us looking at Aston Villa and saying, he didn't play well. Obviously, that's absolutely true. But I don't think he's been at his best, really, since he had that spell, sort of the turn of the year, really, the Club World Cup, the Leicester game. He was brilliant. I think, we played Wolves, I think, twice in the space of about 2 weeks. Those sorts of matches, I think he scored the winner away at Tottenham in that sort of period as well. And that sort of time is what you want to see of Firmino, but that's a substantial amount of time since we've seen that sort of level consistently week by week from him. So I think it's right that you have the conversation, but it's difficult because you don't really have anybody who can go in there. Divock Origi is probably the one that can play through the middle, but he's just not at the same level as Firmino. Even when he's at his best, he's just nowhere near. You look at someone like Takumi Minamino, you could argue that maybe you give him a go and put him in for the derby and use Firmino off the bench, not least because he's going away with Brazil and they're not coming back until a couple of days before that match. But even with Minamino, there's not really any evidence to suggest, certainly tactically, that he can do it any differently. And in terms of scoring and the sort of completeness of his game, again, we've not quite seen it from him. So it's a difficult one to know whether you stick or twist, because there is obviously an excellent player in there, and I'm very much hopeful that we will see that peak level of Firmino again. But at the same time, at this moment in time, it is absolutely fair to criticise him.
I mean, Joe, a lot of this is based on a piece that you wrote for the site about Firmino. It was yesterday or Monday. I forget the days.
Monday. Yeah.
I mean, one thing I would say is I don't think he struggles with confidence. Like, I think people have been sort of quick to label his shot of confidence. His confidence looks poor. His body language when he came off and stuff like that. I mean, Liverpool were getting hammered in the game. That's probably the reason why he looked a bit dejected. I don't think there's any doubt that he sort of rolls into the next one and doesn't have any doubts about his ability. Where are you with it?
I mean, all of this, we have to preface by saying I consider him probably to be the most important or influential player of Klopp's entire reign. I probably would go that far, alongside Mane, perhaps. That said, I probably would be a bit harsher than both Mark and Matt there. I honestly think that was one of the worst games he's ever had for Liverpool against Villa. To the point where it wasn't just that he wasn't offering much. He obviously didn't score, but it wasn't that he wasn't offering much or he was quiet. It was that he was actively hurting Liverpool, I felt, in terms of the places he was giving the ball away in. I think it was, I kind of lose track of the goals now, but I think it was Villa's 6th, the Grealish one, where it's a really simple pass in the middle of the pitch and he takes a really heavy touch. Villa go through and score straight away. And there were a couple of other situations that materialised like that. Just really basic actions that you expect him to be able to do, where he's dribbling through, he's got players to either side and he passes it straight to Mings or Konza, whoever it was. So I thought he was an active hindrance in the game, which isn't always the case. He can be quiet. I think what concerns me a bit is I think we've almost got used to speaking about Firmino in a way where we don't want to criticise the goals because we all know that he does all this other stuff. He tracks back, he wins the ball high up the pitch, he links play. That's all true, or it has been true in the past. But I do think what Matt says, you haven't necessarily seen much of that stuff really since around sort of Christmas time. And that's a long time now. I was having a look at his numbers for this piece. And I know that he's not meant to be as prolific, or he just isn't as prolific as most number 9s because he plays a different role. But that's 2 goals and 23 appearances now, which no matter where you're playing on a pitch for this Liverpool team, it is a bit of an issue, I think. And that's not to say that I think Liverpool needs to kind of think about kind of replacing him. They obviously can't because the transfer window's closed, but I wouldn't want to anyway. It's more that I don't necessarily think it would be a bad thing for him to have a couple of games out of a team, whether that's Minamino through the middle. Salah can obviously play through the middle and you play Jota out wide. Or you change the system. I just think persisting with it, I sometimes do worry that it's almost a little bit too comfortable that you can kind of play as bad of that and your place in the team is under no threat.
I'll come back to you, Joel. I mean, is he the player who would benefit most from changing the shape, do you think? Because, I mean, the other argument to this is we've hardly seen any of Minamino, and I expected him to play a bit more than he has already. I know there's only been 4 games or whatever, but I thought he'd get more minutes than what he has. I mean, there's times where he's coming on for like 30 seconds in games. Would it benefit both of them to sort of change it to that 4-2-3-1 and have maybe Salah in front of them?
Quite possibly, I think. I'm surprised we haven't seen really any 4-2-3-1 in the league so far this season. I know we played something like that against Lincoln, which was a bit of an exception, but the one time really where you've seen Minamino and Firmino play well together and not look like they're getting in each other's way was in the second half of the Community Shield, which I know is a bit of a different situation. It's in pre-season. Both teams hadn't really prepared properly for it, but that looked right as a shape for both of them. The spaces they were picking up, they were interchanging quite nicely. At some points, Firmino was up front, Minamino was behind, and at other times they swapped round. I think that would make Liverpool less predictable. I think it also is a way of getting Jota in the team. And I think, the way they attack is more multifaceted. If you've got 4 attackers there, it puts less pressure on the fullbacks because you've got more width from out wide. You've got more cover from midfield. That was another huge problem in the Villa game. It was just the spaces were all over the place in midfield. I think if you've got 2 sort of sitting there alongside each other, that tends to help Fabinho as well, I think. I think the other thing with Firmino to remember, I'm quite interested in the fact that before he came to Hoffenheim, when he first came through Brazil, his original position was a defensive midfielder. And you think sometimes when you watch that, you can kind of see why that is because of the kind of positions he takes up and just the way he plays the game. I do wonder, like Mark referenced and like you just said, whether they do change the shape a little bit to get him in those deeper positions on the ball where the onus isn't so much on him to sort of spearhead the attack. It might just reignite a spark. I don't necessarily think we'll see that straight away against Everton, but it is something to consider. Liverpool have got a lot of games coming up and they need some version of Firmino towards his best as soon as possible.
They buy Jota. Now, they were obviously, that says they're in the market in the summer for an attacker because they go and get one. They don't buy a number 9. No, they don't buy Raul Jimenez, which that says to me that I think if you're sitting down with Jurgen Klopp and his management team now, his staff, I think they're saying we cover enough bases across the board of having the 3 of those in the side. Like if you use Jimenez as the example, I think they'd probably say Mane's better with his back to goal, which I think he is. I think where I'm getting at is, again, it's back to the point of, do they think there's enough countenance from what all 3 forward players provide in an attacking trio to give them everything that they're looking for, and that's including goals if Firmino isn't scoring? Or does it get to a point where, like I said before, they're looking at it and they're saying, well, we need to take him out the side? Because if you take Villa out the equation, Liverpool beat 2, very fancy top 6 clubs this season by a comfortable 2-goal margin. And we've seen a lot last season where, I think if there was an argument to be had, a lot of it was last season when they weren't killing games off in the manner in which they needed to. They weren't giving themselves that comfort blanket in the manner in which they need to. Again, you can argue whether Firmino was part of that, but do you think they're maybe thinking that by keeping the 3 of them in a front 3, they're getting sort of everything they want, just in a sort of very lopsided manner?
Yeah, I think so. I think obviously we always would look towards Salah and Mane as the primary sources of goals in this team. Firmino's almost like a supplement to that. I think in terms of the reason that they've gone for Jota rather than somebody else's, simply because he can play in all 3 of those positions. Obviously, you're looking for that 4th choice attacker, somebody who can come in and add genuine quality and add genuine competition for those players. I don't think they would have been looking for someone who could just play as a number 9 and would be a goal scorer. I think part of the attraction of him really was the fact that he can play all the way across. We've seen him play on the right already for Liverpool. He didn't do that too much for Wolves, but certainly he played off the left a lot. He can play potentially as a false 9 himself, Jota. And I suppose it was the same with Minamino. We've mentioned him a couple of times. I think he's one who could play certainly left and right through the middle as well as a kind of Firmino light, if you like. He's not as good at doing that job, but potentially if you put him in the side for a sustained period of time, I think he possibly could be. I think it's just more the way that Liverpool work, really, the way that their transfers are, the way that Jurgen Klopp likes his squad to be. They don't really buy specialists necessarily who could just come in and do one specific job to supplement that squad. It's got to be somebody who can play in sort of, well, probably you'd say 4 positions. You'd say Jota could play as a 9 left and right, and as probably as a 10 as well. It's more a case, I think, of not necessarily not replacing Firmino. It's more being able to replace all three of them, should that need to be the case. So it's more part of a wider transfer strategy, I think, in terms of who they've gone for this summer. But I think going forward, this isn't a question that's going to go away just because Liverpool have signed Jota this summer. I would imagine they're probably going to be in the market for another attacker potentially next summer, certainly the summer after that, because you look at Salah, Mane and Firmino, at some point there is a succession plan that has to come into place.
Indeed. I wonder whether that's Jadon Sancho, but that's probably for another day. Mark, you touched on it before. The attacking in general, I picked up on it this morning. Liverpool haven't scored a Premier League goal yet this season outside of the penalty area. Not a great surprise, given how they attack and stuff like coming up against low blocks and teams who sit in. But you see from Villa the other night, they get lucky with a lot of deflections, but they're having shots. Now, I'm not a big fan of a shot. I said on this podcast the other week, I'm seeing a bit of the Phil Coutinho frustration I used to get in Curtis Jones at the minute, whereby he would sort of do all he can to open his body and get a shot off, where you just want him to play one more pass. Is there an argument for it, do you think? Do you think Liverpool need to sort of take a few more pop shots, play for second balls, loose balls that break? Or are you happy with sort of how they're attacking currently?
I don't think it's as much as they've got to take more pop shots from outside. I think they've just got to be trying a bit more unpredictable, I think. And that's something that Klopp and Pep Linders have said before. They've got to be more unpredictable if they want to win the league again. I mean, I touched on it before. It just comes across at times, certainly in the Arsenal game, it just comes across as like they're trying to score the perfect goal. Like something that Man City have become known for, but they obviously do it quite a lot. So they've been doing it for a few years under Guardiola. Like they play about 20, 30, 40 passes before it's a tap in out from 6 yards out from Sterling or Aguero, whoever it is. And I think Liverpool are gradually becoming a bit more like that, because I think that partly becomes from teams are sitting back on them a lot more, because whether that's respect, whether that's fear of getting opening up too much. Obviously, Villa did the exact opposite and took Liverpool on and got the better of it. But I think part of it just comes from the tactics from the opposition force Liverpool to play in that way, in that they've got to try and break them down, whether it's these intricate passes that, well, when it comes off and when it works well, is really, really good to watch. Especially when you see, I think it was the Chelsea goal at Chelsea when Mane scores a header, brilliant bit of play with Firmino, Salah and Trent on that right-hand side. And when it works, it does really work well. But when you see, I mean, Villa is a classic example where literally nothing works bar a couple of moments from Salah and Jota to get the couple of goals. I just think Liverpool have to take, like I say, be more unpredictable and take a chance. If it's like, I mean, we saw it last season, Fabinho against Man City, as a 25, 30 yards outside the goal, hits it and goes and beats the keeper with ease. And those sorts of things are being forced. Well, might be forced to happen this season, because teams will sit off Liverpool a lot more because they are the champions. That's what happens. They have that aura about them now. They're not the chasing pack like they were last season. But Liverpool have got to deal with that. That comes with the territory of being defending champions. It's not something they've been used to for 30 years now. So it's something they've got to adjust to. But in terms of the attacking sense, they've just got to try and be more predictable, whether that's taking more shots at goal or play for set pieces if they have to, like some teams do, which they were very good at last season, getting set piece goals. Yeah, I just think it's got to be something that they've got to sort out quickly, because I say we certainly don't want to repeat of Villa to happen again. Like Matt said earlier, there will be more freak games this season because no crowds are going. I think we're going to see a lot more of them on. But obviously that will go in Liverpool's favour, might go against them, and so it will happen for the rest of the teams across the league.
Yeah, I mean, there's the old Pep Linders quote, Joel, which I'm paraphrasing, but it's sort of, we don't want to create sort of 4 out of 10 chances. We want to create 4 8 out of 10 chances, and it's sort of how you define those chances in your own mind. I think a lot of the time, like I always think back to a James Milner goal against Burnley away in 18-19, and we're losing the game 1-0, and
the left-footed one outside the box.
Yeah, and it's about 18 yards out, but it's clearly an instruction. It's you get your shot from there because they're basically defending on their own goal line, and it works. And yeah, I do think, back to sort of the Firmino argument again, Liverpool are maybe sort of trying to achieve perfection at times with a couple of these chances, and in games like that, maybe you sort of do have to fight with fire a little bit and just see sort of what comes off for you. Again, the Community Shield's another example, really, where Liverpool just create a bit of chaos in the box and the ball breaks from Minamino. And whether that is by shooting or not, I'm not sure, but I think I'm with Mark in that there certainly has to be an element of a bit more unpredictability to what they do at times in order to sort of create different attacking situations.
Yeah, it's striking a balance, I think. You don't want to go back to a sort of situation where you're relying on a player like Coutinho when he used to just sort of cut in and bend one into the top, or try and bend one into the top corner whenever he could. But I think having a little bit more of that in Liverpool's game would be useful. If anything, it just puts doubt in defenders' minds that they can't just sit back and try and kind of shuttle Liverpool out wide and block the middle, because if there's someone who's capable of sticking the ball in from 20, 25 yards, if they know that that's a threat that's there, then that sort of, it creates the doubt. And I think that's something Liverpool haven't had too much of in these first few games. One of my favourite goals from last season, remember the first half against Southampton at Anfield when Liverpool were kind of on the ropes really for a lot of it, didn't play well at all. And then Oxlade-Chamberlain just shoots low and hard into the corner from, it's about 20 yards out. And it's a kind of percentage shot. It's similar to that Milner one that you mentioned. It's kind of through a sea of bodies so that the keeper can't do anything about it. It's not in the top corner. It's just kind of low and hard. And if he gets it right, which he does, it's got a good chance of going in. And I think the more Liverpool could have of that now, the better. Obviously, Oxlade-Chamberlain's out, but there are other players who can do it. Again, I've been doing a piece we've got all our Klopp anniversary stuff coming out this week. But on the 16-17 season, Emre Can scores a couple of those goals. Burnley at home, I think, was a horrible 2-1 where he shoots again. It's a similar sort of distance, 20 yards out, and it's just through the sea of bodies into the bottom corner. And I think that's something that, against Villa, even against Arsenal, the amount of players they had behind the ball, honestly, you could draw a circle around them. There was 10 of them literally on the edge of their own box, and you would quite like sometimes a player to just sort of put their foot through it. And even if it doesn't go in, like you said, the Minamino goal in a Community Shield is one where the ball just bounces. Sometimes if you take a little bit of a risk from distance, it can just ricochet and fall nicely for you.
Yeah, I mean, maybe one player to sort of add that balance, Matt, could be Curtis Jones. You see a lot of the time when he comes into the side, he's more than willing to sort of look for opportunities to get a shot off, and he's got a good eye for goal, it seems too. I think you might see a bit more of that. I expect him to start at least one of Liverpool's 2 league games against West Ham and Sheffield United in between the Champions League games. So do you think that's something to look out for?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's obviously something that Curtis can do. He's one of those players where he's a bit more of a dribbler than a lot of Liverpool players are. They tend to just pass the ball about, whereas he can sort of carry it over that couple of yards, engineer himself a little bit of space. I mean, I'm slightly wary of criticising Liverpool in terms of their ingenuity and the amount of goals. I think we just have to sort of think of Aston Villa as a complete anomaly. It's not something that we're going to see frequently from Liverpool. It's not a performance that you're going to look at. And then you look at the other 3 games, they've played Leeds, who are causing everyone problems. They've played Chelsea, they've played Arsenal, and they've scored an average of 3 goals in each of those games. So I think we have to sort of be careful where we sort of set our expectations of how they score and how they go about things. I don't think creatively they've been too bad, but I suppose it's just sort of emphasised when you take someone like Sadio Mane out of the equation, which is going to be the case at times this season. So, yeah, someone like Curtis Jones, Naby Keita at his best, he can do similar sorts of things. We saw that with the goal against Chelsea at the end of last season. It's just all about sort of keeping ahead of that curve, isn't it? I suppose for Liverpool, it's got to be almost a horses for courses approach at times. They are just going to have to sit in and do what they need to do to get the results over the line, because they're going to be playing, as you say, Champions League, Premier League for 6-7 weeks. And then we enter the festive period, and it's just going to be sort of all systems go for the next few months. But I suppose it's never going to be a bad thing if you can create goals in a slightly different way. I just wonder, how much is that going to be the case? How often is Curtis Jones going to start? I'm not too sure, to be honest, but I suppose whichever way you can give yourself the edge, that's absolutely, especially in a season like this, something that you've got to try and do.
Okay, the transfer window has slammed shut. The yellow ties have been well and truly taken off. Liverpool have done their business, which we know is Costas Smikas, Thiago Alcantara and Diogo Jota. We asked Tom Victor to write us a piece on the winners and losers of the transfer window. That is out at 4 o'clock today, today being Wednesday. So by the time this podcast comes out, you'll be well able to read that. Tom, for information, gentlemen, has gone for the winners being Liverpool, Everton and Aston Villa, and 3 losers being West Ham, Manchester United and Wolverhampton Wanderers. Matt, would you agree with that? Would you disagree? Would you throw anyone else into the mix?
Yeah, those are the ones that stand out. I think that's pretty spot on, to be honest. I think Liverpool, obviously, Thiago, a huge signing for Liverpool. We've not seen a great deal of him. Diogo Jota, I mentioned before. I think he's a real quality addition, and Costas Simikas in a similar sort of way. If Andy Robertson was to miss a portion of the season, you would think at least you've got a player in there that can really sort of come in and not change the way that Liverpool play. So I think it's been definitely a good window for Liverpool. You look around at someone like Aston Villa, I think obviously the sort of price tags that they've paid possibly would be the thing that stops me from saying that they were a complete winner in the transfer window, but there's no doubt about it. They've got some really good players in there. Obviously, Liverpool saw that firsthand themselves. Obviously, they've kept Jack Grealish as well. That was possibly their signing of the summer in a way. So I think they've certainly done well. I think Everton as well, in a similar sort of way to Aston Villa, they've sort of spent a bit more money than possibly some people would think that they have. But I think, certainly with Alan and James Rodriguez, you'd look at those 2 players and think that you compare their midfield now to what they had last season, it's just a completely different level. I think Everton are almost the most improved team, if you like, so far in the Premier League from last season compared to this one. So it would be hard to disagree with those. And in terms of the losers, I suppose the obvious ones are Manchester United. It's been said so many times, but they spent the whole summer looking at Jadon Sancho. Some reports now suggesting that Liverpool have overtaken them in the race for that already for next summer. But to go from somebody like Jadon Sancho, who I think is certainly one of the best players of his generation potentially coming through the system, and to go from him to then signing someone like Edinson Cavani, which to me very much reminds me of the Radamel Falcao signing. I just can't see how that works for them. I think he's on huge wages. It seems like a bit of a panic buy. So certainly for them, I think if you were a Manchester United fan, you'd be very concerned going into the season. Possibly even someone like Everton could overtake them and get into the top 6, I think.
Mark, is there any way we're having a different conversation at the end of the season with who basically has a good and bad window? Do you see any way in which sort of United maybe improve, Everton drop off? Are we still in early days, or would you go along with those choices?
Yeah, I think I completely agree with what Matt said. Everton seem a completely different animal this time around. The midfield, it's amazing what a couple of high-quality players can do. I know it's early days of the season, but let's not forget, they've not got Champions League or any form of Europe. They've got a clear run pretty much in the league, bar the League Cup when that comes around Christmas time. Similar to what Liverpool had in 16-17, they haven't got any outside commitments. That will probably do them the world of good. Manchester United, again, it just seems the same thing every year with them. They just scratch around for who seem to be the best players in the world at the time, and then just end up trying to find someone to make a statement sign as a panic. Cavani, I think it's a bit unfair to think that compared to Falcao, I think Falcao was. I see where you're getting at, but I think Cavani's got a bit more experience with him. He's got a bit more of a goal scorer now. He's in a couple of leagues. He's got it with Napoli and then at PSG. But again, I think, have they improved on last season? I wouldn't say they have. If they get a few penalties, which they continue to do, I think Bruno's obviously going to be a big player for them, which he still is this season. But in terms of losers, I still think Man City haven't addressed a key area for them, which has been a problem for them, which I think is a striker, because we've seen that Aguero's out, They're coming back soon, admittedly, but Jesus doesn't have the same impact, I don't think. So I think they spent how much money on centre backs, which they continue to do since Guardiola's been there. But yeah, I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find someone else who's had a bad window other than those. But like I say, in terms of Liverpool as well, they certainly have improved the squad depth, which I think we've all been calling for. Like I say, left back, Tsimikas, forwards with Jota, and then any team in world football will be grateful to have Thiago in their team, whether he's a regular starter or a squad player. Yeah, who could argue with that? So it's, like I say, it's still early doors, but the signs are good. Certainly for some of the teams that we've already talked about, but yeah, certainly the losers, I couldn't really argue with those.
I mean, I was going to compare Cavani to Mario Balotelli, so I'll shut up. Joel, I'll end with you. I'm fascinated. Where would you put Chelsea, Joel?
I was going to say that because he didn't include them in the winners or the losers, did he?
No, it's a really, really funny one because I think that's why I asked Mark before whether there's any way we sort of change our mind come the end of the window. I think if people are thinking maybe Chelsea have lost a little bit or not done the business they should have, they might be having a rethink, especially if Chelsea ends up with another manager come the season's end. Yeah,
I think if you were to ask this before a ball had been kicked this season, purely just looking at the incoming signings, a lot of people have had Chelsea number one, talking them up as title contenders really before the start of the season, which I never really bought into. That they fascinate me because I've watched, I think, every game they played so far, and from what it seems, Lampard hasn't got a clue how he's going to fit all these together in sort of a cohesive tactical plan, really. The game so far, he's had Timo Werner essentially playing as a left midfielder on 4-2-3-1, which is baffling. Whenever he receives the ball, he's basically nowhere near goal, so it's not really that surprising that he's not scored yet. And that might change. He's not had Pulisic so far. Ziyech hasn't played yet, I don't think. So once those are kind of fit and up and running, that sort of might reignite Werner. But yeah, even Havertz as well. I know he got the hat-trick in the League Cup against, was it Barnsley, I think it was. But in the league games, he's just looked lost. I think he's clearly got loads of talent and ability, but it's almost like he's been given all these like new shiny toys and has chucked them on and said basically go and do bits and see what happens. And it's not really clicked yet. I do like Chilwell, I have to say. I think Alonso has been a problem for them for so long. Ever since Conte left and they stopped playing 3-4-3, he's a left back who can't defend, which is never a good thing, as we know. So I do like Chilwell. I think he's a good player. Thiago Silva, that was such an obvious position for them to try and strengthen. He might end up doing okay. That mistake against West Brom was not a great start, but I'm not convinced. And then the keeper as well, it's such an unknown quantity. When you get to a position where you're having to replace the most expensive goalkeeper in the history of the sport with a 20 million signing from the French league that you hope might be quite good, but you're not sure. That'll be interesting to keep an eye on. The other one I was going to call you out on, Dan, did you not have James Rodriguez down as flop of the season in your Liverpool.com predictions?
Well, it was based on the fact that he won't fancy it when it gets cold. Well, so yeah, he's all right at the minute. It's quite autumnal in Liverpool at the moment. It's still a bit mild, so he's all right. I'll reserve judgment for when the winter fully kicks in. Now, to be honest, I've egg on my face over Everton. I was Everton sceptical, as I always am. Everton curious, you can call me. But I had a worry that it was sort of a quick fix, a quick year, 2 years. But if they're enjoying themselves, how they obviously are, then who am I to call them out? They've had enough sort of misery down the years. So long may it continue, I say. That's been it this week for Liverpool.com. Be sure to check out that Firmino piece that Joel's written, the Sadio Mane piece that Mark's written, and all the stuff that Matt is doing with Blood Red, which is really excellent. Liverpool.com will continue to be giving you content over the international break and also, building up to the games that are going to start thick and fast when Liverpool come back. So, yeah, we'll see you this time next week. Hope you've enjoyed the show. Take care, be safe, and see you again.